to call for bipartisan unity in a divided Congress while laying out his agenda, including his hardline immigration policy that is unlikely to win over much Democrat support. Now, that speech lasting 1 hour, 22 minutes, punctuated by applause, mainly from members of his own Republican Party. President Donald Trump pivoting from calls of political reconciliation to confronting opposition lawmakers with his insistence on a southern border wall with Mexico. That's no different to what he's been saying. Warnings also that the only obstacle to the continued economic boom in the U.S. Was ridiculous partisan investigations. Of course, the President Trump referring to the investigations against himself by the Mueller Commission looking at possible collusion with the Russians. All right, I believe that we do have our U.S. correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease on the line. Sherwin, thank you for being with us. And let's start with the wall. I saw that the Wall Street Journal saying he was actually relaxed on the issue. He's still saying he'll get it done, but he's not threatening a state of emergency. Is there any change in tone around the wall?
Well, you're quoting the Wall Street Journal, which is a conservative-leaning publication in the United States and has been very vociferous in its backing of this president. But also, Francis, there are congressional negotiations that are continuing, and that deadline will only lapse on the 15th of February. So for the president to use the opportunity, the platform of the State of the Union, to declare a state of emergency or a humanitarian emergency on the border before that process is completed would have literally put the cart before the horse. It's something that he keeps in his back pocket. And I would disagree with the characterization in the Wall Street Journal in terms of how this president characterized the what he calls a humanitarian crisis on the border. There was no outreach to Democrats, given that these negotiations are continuing. There was no give from this president in terms of, for example, the DACA recipients or a path to citizenship that might have brought Democrats on board in terms of portions of a steel barrier, possible areas where a wall might very well, where they could concede to a wall. And I think that's what the conversation point is that while there were elements of bipartisanship in this speech by President Donald Trump, very uncharacteristically so, on the fundamental issue that shut down the government for more than a month, the president has not come with any new ideas that will bring the Democratic-led Congress that has a Democratic-led speaker in Nancy Pelosi on board so that a deal could be reached by February 15th. And I think that's what the conversation needs to be. This president, again, talked about drugs pouring into the country, illegal aliens that are coming into it, that murder people in the United States. There was no compromise, there was no give from the president to Democrats on that issue.
So then does anyone believe, Sherwin, all the talk about a united nation? He said we should not focus on our differences, declare that we are all Americans. But like you say, still so divided.
I want to read some of the opening statements he made at the beginning of this speech. It really caught a lot of us off guard. The agenda, he says, I will lay out this evening is not a Republican agenda or a Democratic agenda. Francis, he said it was the agenda of the American people. He also went on, there's a new opportunity in American politics if only we have the courage to seize it. Victory is not winning for our party. Victory is winning for our country. And of course, the big issue that Democrats are taking away from this is his statement basically warning that if there are frivolous or ridiculous investigations that continue into his administration, that they will not be able to achieve the very bipartisanship and unity that he was calling for. In fact, Nancy Pelosi, soon after he completed speaking, released a statement basically saying that the president spoke about the honor of being in the House chamber and all the progress that had been achieved here, but at the same time he threatened the U.S. Congress's a constitutional responsibility at oversight. And this is what we are going to see in the weeks and months ahead under this new Democratic-led Congress. Unlike that under Speaker Paul Ryan, which was a Republican-controlled House, this is a Congress that is going to investigate this administration. It's going to investigate deregulation. It might request this president or subpoena his tax returns, and it might reopen investigations that were closed under the previous run Congress into elements that the Robert Mueller special counsel is investigating, Russian collusion and the like. So there's a great deal of concern from this president that Democrats will be pursuing his administration, himself possibly, in their oversight responsibilities, and a very stark warning that while calling for unity, we might not get stuff done if these investigations continue. So a very interesting dynamic certainly presented by the president last night.
Well, the Democrats came back with a strong response, and the world has been introduced to Stacey Abrams. Tell us about her.
Yeah, she was given a really big national platform here for the first time. Of course, you and I know Stacey Abrams by virtue of her running for the governorship of Georgia, the state of Georgia, in the midterm elections last night. She would have had she succeeded, she would have become the first black woman to ever become a governor in the United States. Let's listen to elements of what she had to say, giving the official Democratic response.
We know bipartisanship could craft a 21st century immigration plan, but this administration chooses to cage children and tear families apart. Compassionate treatment at the border is not the same as open borders. President Reagan understood this. President Obama understood this. Americans understand this. And Democrats stand ready to effectively secure our ports and borders. But we must all embrace that from agriculture to healthcare to entrepreneurship, America is made stronger by the presence of immigrants, not walls. Even as I am very disappointed by the president's approach to our problems, I still don't want him to fail. But we need him to tell the truth and to respect his duties and respect the extraordinary diversity that defines America.
So just to repeat there, Francis, I don't want the president to fail, but we need him to tell the truth and to respect his duties. Telling the truth, I think, is something we can all agree on, both as journalists and I think Democrats and Republicans alike.
Sherwin, some people are saying this sort of opened the next bout of electioneering, because he was talking about socialism and Stacey Abrams talking about social responsibility. Is that a fair enough assessment?
Very much so, and we've said in our reporting earlier this week that this really, given the political counter-punches that he's received from Nancy Pelosi since she assumed the speakership in early January, of course, this big defeat in terms of the government shutdown, not getting the funding that he had requested, despite the inability of some 800,000 federal workers to receive a salary, many of them furloughed during this process, and feeling a great deal of pain. So the president not then achieving the $5.7 billion that he wanted for the wall. And so this really was his platform, given the national stage that the State of the Union affords him, to recalibrate, to perhaps, find some momentum. And really, I think that was the goal of the speechwriters here. If you listen to how Republicans are framing this was a president that is now back. He has the wind at his back. This was a bipartisan effort. It was different Trump. It was teleprompter Trump, which we are not necessarily always used to. So very much reframing the debate. And the expectation is that, given the leverage that the State of the Union affords and the platform it affords the president, he should get a bump in the polls in terms of this. And, when the president starts to see his numbers up, your guess is as good as mine, Francis.
All right, thank you very much, Sherwin Bryce-Pease from the U.S. And the U.S. currently digesting the President Donald Trump's State of the Union address. Thank you very much for that. And it's over to some sporting action.